I never thought I'd hear my own mother say the words, "You're becoming a real nuisance and burden, Natasha." But there she was, yelling it through a video call, standing in her brightly lit living room with a cocktail in hand, while I sat in a hospital bed on Christmas Eve, clutching my phone with trembling hands. My name is Natasha Wilson. I'm 33 years old, a widowed mother of twins, and up until recently I thought family meant unconditional love. I was wrong. The pain in my abdomen was sharp, blinding even, but the hurt in my chest from her words, that's what nearly took my breath away. My 2-year-olds Ethan and Emily sat on the floor in the corner of the sterile hospital room, quietly arranging crayons and picture books while a nurse named Valerie adjusted my IV. I tried to speak, but my throat was tight. "Mom, please, I need someone to watch the twins. I'm being taken in for emergency surgery within the hour." And my mother waved her hand dismissively. "Don't you dare ask us to cancel our plans again. We've had these Elton John tickets for months. You'll just have to figure it out." Behind her, my dad leaned in and added, "We're retired now. We deserve to enjoy our lives without your constant problems." I froze, not from the pain radiating through my stomach, but from the realization that I was alone, not just physically, but emotionally, spiritually. My parents, who I'd been supporting financially for years since their early retirement, couldn't spare a single evening to watch their only grandchildren while I went under the knife. I'd been transferring $2,500 a month to them religiously for the past 3 years. Even after my husband James died 6 months ago in a car crash, I kept sending them money. Mortgage help, they called it. Retirement support. Family duty, my mother liked to say. Foolish. That's what I felt in that moment. Blindingly foolish. Valerie must have seen my face drain of color because she stepped forward and gently rested a hand on my shoulder. "I have a friend," she said softly. "She's a trauma-informed nanny, Olivia. Worked in a children's hospital before going private. Let me call her." "Please." My lips trembled and I nodded. "Yes, please call her." That was the moment I realized I didn't just need help, I needed new boundaries. As Valerie stepped out to make the call, I stared at my children. Ethan was humming a little tune James used to sing. Emily clutched her giraffe, plush the same one James picked out the day they were born. The tears came hard then, not just for the pain or the fear of surgery, but for how deeply abandoned I felt. I had lost my husband, now I had lost my parents too. And yet through the grief, something flickered, a defiance, a spark. I'm done begging people to love me properly. When Olivia arrived an hour later, everything changed. She entered the hospital room with the calm confidence of someone who's handled real chaos before. She knelt down to the twins' level, introduced herself gently, and within minutes had them engaged in a quiet game using a set of animal flashcards she'd brought in her bag. "Hi, Natasha," she said, her voice soft but grounded. "Valerie told me everything. I'm staying as long as you need. They'll be safe, I promise." I didn't have the strength to speak, but I reached out and squeezed her hand. That moment, more than anything, was when I stopped being the daughter who tolerated neglect and started becoming the mother who would fight for her children and herself. The doctor entered soon after, clipboard in hand, explaining the severity: internal bleeding, emergency exploratory surgery, possible complications due to the trauma my body had been under since James's death. My head spun. The room felt too bright, too cold. But I wasn't scared of the pain anymore. I was terrified of not waking up, of leaving my children alone. "Could you bring me my phone?" I whispered. Valerie handed it to me gently. I took a deep breath. First, I opened my banking app and canceled all future transfers to my parents. Done. Then I sent a message to both of them, short and clear: I will no longer be providing financial support. My children and I deserve better than being your afterthoughts. Don't contact me again. No love, Natasha. No apologies. I hit send. As the orderlies came to wheel me out of the room, I looked over at Ethan and Emily one last time. Olivia gave me a reassuring nod. For the first time in my life, as I was being taken toward the operating room, I felt something unexpected: freedom. The surgery was a success, but just barely. I woke up 14 hours later in the dim recovery ward with Olivia softly reading a picture book to Ethan and Emily at my bedside. The pain was a dull roar in my abdomen, but I was alive. I'd made it. My first thought wasn't even about me. It was, did they eat? Did they sleep? And then I saw Olivia's calm smile the way Emily rested her head on her lap, and I exhaled a breath I didn't know I was holding. I was still here, and more importantly, they were safe. Over the next 5 days, I floated in and out of consciousness, sedated but aware enough to feel the absence. No flowers from my parents, no calls, not even a "hope you're okay" text from either of them. What I did have were 27 missed calls from my mother, my father, Jessica. They hadn't contacted the hospital. They hadn't asked the nurses for updates. Instead, they'd bombarded my phone while I slept under painkillers, the voicemail transcriptions, reading like a masterclass in narcissistic spin. "We need to talk about this tantrum you're having. It's irresponsible to stop the mortgage help during the holidays. You're being vindictive, Natasha. That's not like you. And then, we're going to lose our cruise deposit because of this. Is that really what you want?" Not one question about how the surgery went. Not one word about Ethan or Emily. Just panic over money and missed vacations. That's when I knew this wasn't a phase or a misstep. It wasn't even a misunderstanding. This was the truth, the raw, unfiltered reality of who they had always been. Jessica's texts were different. Shorter, confused. What surgery? Why are they freaking out about money? They told me you were just having a routine checkup. My heart ached. They had lied to her too, downplayed what was happening so they could keep up their facade of being the doting, burdened parents while justifying why Elton John mattered more than their daughter's emergency room call. I responded with the facts. No emotion, just the timeline, the risk, the refusal. And a photo Olivia sitting in the recliner holding Ethan and Emily while I lay unconscious in the background. Jessica's reply came instantly. "Oh my God. Natasha, I didn't know. I'm so sorry. I would have watched them. I should have." I believed her. Jessica wasn't like them, at least not completely. She was a product of the same broken household, but had always been shielded by their favoritism. Maybe, just maybe, this would help her see. By the time I was discharged, I'd made a few key decisions. First, I hired Olivia part-time. She refused pay at first. "You're recovering. This is what friends do." But I insisted. She'd become family in a way my actual family never had. Second, I contacted a lawyer to draft a will. If something ever happened to me, the twins would never end up with my parents. I listed Olivia as their emergency guardian with Jessica as an alternate pending her long-term trustworthiness. And third, I blocked my parents on every platform. No more money, no more guilt, no more access. When I got home, the apartment felt smaller than I remembered, but also warmer. It was mine. And for the first time in months, I wasn't living in someone else's expectations. I was building something, however fragile, for me and my children. That night, after the twins were asleep, I sat in the living room, surrounded by the quiet buzz of the fridge and the glow of the baby monitor. I checked my bank account. Without that $2,500 monthly payment, my budget actually balanced. I could breathe, maybe even start saving again. I hadn't realized just how heavy that financial burden had been until it was gone. I should have cut them off years ago. A few days later, Jessica came over with a casserole and some of those fancy pre-cut fruit trays. We sat together on the couch, sipping tea, while the twins played with blocks on the rug. Our conversation was tentative at first, careful. But soon something softened between us. "They always made it sound like you were the one pulling away," Jessica said. "That you didn't want to be around the family." I sighed. "No, they just made it impossible to feel welcome." She nodded. "I'm starting to understand that now." It was the first time in my adult life that I felt like Jessica saw me not as the bitter sister or the distant mom, but as someone who had been surviving without support for far too long. And then came the knock. I knew it before I checked the peephole. The kind of weight that settles in your gut when the past comes calling. It was them. My mother clutching her designer handbag like it was a life vest. My father's arms crossed face taut with disapproval and entitlement. I didn't open the door, just cracked it slightly, the chain still locked. "What do you want?" I asked, my voice sharp but steady. "We've been so worried, darling," my mother cooed. "You haven't answered our calls. We had to make sure you and the children were all right." I narrowed my eyes. "You knew exactly where I was. You just didn't care." My father stepped forward. "We need to talk about this ridiculous financial situation. The bank called about our mortgage. We had to dip into our cruise savings." My grip on the door tightened. "Then I guess it's a good thing you didn't go on the cruise." His eyes hardened. "Natasha, this isn't fair." "No," I said, shaking my head. "What's not fair is choosing Elton John over your daughter's emergency surgery and expecting a paycheck afterward." Silence. They didn't apologize. They didn't even try. Just empty expressions desperate for access. Not love. Not reconciliation, access. I didn't give it to them. Instead, I closed the door, and this time I didn't cry. The next morning they came back, but this time they didn't come alone. I heard the knock before I saw the familiar face through the peephole. My Aunt Patty, my mother's older sister, longtime family mediator, self-declared queen of emotional neutrality. "Natasha, sweetheart," she called through the door. "Let's be reasonable. Your parents are struggling without your help." I didn't open the door. I leaned against it, exhaustion still heavy in my post-surgical body. "They managed their finances for decades before I helped them," I said loud enough to be heard. "They chose early retirement, knowing they weren't ready. That wasn't my decision. That was theirs." From behind her, my mother chimed in with her usual dramatics. "We made those decisions because you promised to help us. You said you would be there for us." "No, Mom," I replied calmly. "I offered to help for a while. You turned that into entitlement. We've had to cancel our cruise, Natasha," she snapped. "We might lose the house." And there it was, the real issue. Not concern, not family, just lifestyle. The vacation, the house, the appearances. "I almost died," I said flatly. "And you wouldn't even watch your grandchildren." There was a silence on the other side of the door, thick and unyielding. Then I turned, walked away, and let them keep knocking. I didn't owe them another word. Later that day, my phone buzzed with a notification, an email, from my father. Not to me, but to the entire extended family. Subject line: an update on Natasha. My hands trembled slightly as I read it. The message was textbook emotional blackmail riddled with half-truths and outright omissions. According to him, I had cut off all communication after a minor medical procedure and blindsided them financially after years of mutual support. No mention of the emergency surgery, no mention of the twins, no mention of the concert. Just a classic tale of the ungrateful daughter betraying her elderly, loving parents. What he hadn't counted on was our family group chat. The first reply came from my cousin Michael, who lived near them in Nevada. "Uncle Robert, didn't you just buy a new boat last month?" Then came another reply from Michael's wife. "And Aunt Diana, weren't you wearing a brand new diamond tennis bracelet at Thanksgiving? The one you said was just a little splurge." The cracks started to show. Within an hour, 4 more relatives reached out to me privately asking for my side of the story. I told them. No dramatics, no exaggerations, just the facts. Emergency surgery. 2 toddlers. My parents refusing to help because they had Elton John tickets. And then me waking up to dozens of voicemails about their mortgage. The backlash hit quickly. Even Aunt Patty called me, her voice full of quiet horror. "Natasha, I had no idea. They told me you were just being dramatic about a doctor's appointment. I didn't say I told you so. I didn't need to. Even Jessica, who'd been cautiously rebuilding a relationship with me, came to my defense. I had a huge fight with Mom and Dad, she said over dinner a few nights later. They've been lying to everyone. It's actually disturbing how far they went. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I just nodded. Let them talk, I said. The truth speaks for itself. And it did. Over the next 2 weeks, something strange began to happen. Support started trickling in, not just from Jessica or my cousins, but from neighbors' clients, even Valerie from the hospital. She connected me to a support group for widowed young parents. Their first meeting was online, and I logged in one evening while the twins slept. What I found was relief. Not in misery or comparison, but in the simple shared understanding of people who had faced similar pain and survived it. Thrived even. One of the group members, Diana, was a real estate agent who'd lost her husband to cancer and now raised her son solo. She listened as I vented about my tiny apartment, the lack of space for the twins, the weight of it all. You have equity, she said. Options. You could sell. Move somewhere with a yard, better schools. Rebuild. I hadn't dared to think that far ahead, but maybe she was right. Meanwhile, Jessica had become a regular presence, dropping off groceries, spending time with the twins, even helping with bath time and bedtime stories. She wasn't trying to earn anything. She was just there. It felt new, strange, nice. Then one afternoon, as I sorted through mail, I saw it. A foreclosure notice, addressed to my parents, mailed to my apartment likely because I'd once been listed as an emergency contact. My phone rang 2 hours later. Jessica. They're panicking, she said quietly. They have 60 days to catch up on payments, or they lose the house. What about their retirement funds, I asked, bouncing Emily on my hip while Ethan pushed a toy truck across the floor. Mostly gone, she admitted. They took a second mortgage to buy the boat, then invested the rest in some golf buddies scheme. Lost almost everything. I exhaled slowly. It wasn't that I wanted them to lose their home. I just didn't want to lose myself saving them. Later that evening, I checked my messages. One from my mother. We never thought you'd actually cut us off. We assumed you were just angry, that you'd start sending the money again in a week or two. That one sentence told me everything I needed to know. They never took me seriously. Not my pain, not my grief, not even my surgery. They thought boundaries were temporary, that my survival was negotiable. It wasn't. I had spent my entire life treating guilt like a currency, trading my well-being for scraps of approval. But now I knew better. I wasn't the same woman they had once manipulated. I was a mother, a widow, a survivor, and I wasn't for sale anymore. It happened on a rainy Wednesday. There was a knock at my door again, but this time, it felt heavier. Not like entitlement, not like manipulation. This time, it carried desperation. When I looked through the peephole, I saw both of them, my parents, and this time, they had papers. I opened the door cautiously. My father's tone wasn't condescending or smug like it had been weeks ago. It was clipped, worn, almost pleading. Natasha, he said, holding up a manila folder. We need to talk, please. I hesitated, then stepped aside, not out of sympathy, but curiosity. They sat at the dining table side by side. I stood arms folded as he spread the folder open and revealed a thick spreadsheet printed in color. This is everything he said. Mortgage, credit cards, the boat loan, the timeshare, utilities. If we don't come up with $144,000 in the next 6 weeks, we lose the house. I glanced at the numbers. They were real, staggering, and entirely self-inflicted. What about the boat, I asked, gesturing to the line item labeled Recreation Marine Loan. We'd take a loss, he muttered, already defensive. And the timeshare tried to sell it. Markets flooded, my mother piped in. And besides, those are our retirement luxuries. Luxuries, I repeated. You can't afford. There was a long pause. We could, my father replied quietly, if you'd help. And there it was. Laid out plainly, the expectation that I would save them. Again. You want me to drain my children's future because you mismanaged yours? I asked softly. His jaw tightened. It's the least you could do. After everything we've done for you. I leaned forward. Tell me, what exactly have you done for me, Silence? Emily toddled into the room, then clutching her stuffed giraffe and blinking up at the strangers in her home. My mother's face lit up. There's my precious grandbaby, she said in a sing-song tone. Grandma brought presents. Emily didn't budge. In fact, she backed up and hid behind my legs. They don't know you, I said simply. You've seen them maybe 3 times in their lives. My mother's smile faltered. My father tried a new angle. We've made mistakes, sure. But that doesn't mean we deserve to lose everything. You don't see it. Do you? I said. You did lose everything the moment you chose Elton John over your daughter's life. You just didn't notice because you still thought you had control. It was one mistake. My mother began, her voice cracking. No, I cut in. It was a lifetime of them. The guilt they had always wielded like a weapon didn't work anymore. They had no leverage, no moral ground to stand on, and most importantly, no power over me. You should go, I said. If I ever decide to open this door again, it will be on my terms, not because you brought a spreadsheet. My mother began to cry. I didn't comfort her. I stood there strong and calm, watching them leave with slumped shoulders and heavy steps, and I didn't feel guilty. The very next day, my phone buzzed again. Voicemail. My father's voice this time, not angry, just tired. We're sorry, but you have to understand. We thought we had more time. We thought you'd always be there. We didn't plan for this. He didn't mean the surgery. He meant me cutting them off. I didn't respond. Instead, I met with Diana, the real estate agent from my widowed parents' support group. We'd been emailing back and forth for weeks now, but that day we met for coffee and finally looked at real options. Your apartment has equity, she said, and if we move fast, I can get you into a family neighborhood with space for the twins and a backyard. Backyard. The word felt like a fairy tale. That night, I sat up late after putting the twins to bed and ran the numbers. If I sold the apartment and used the money wisely, I could buy a small house with lower mortgage payments than I was paying now in rent. With the $2,500 I used to give my parents, I could afford better childcare. Maybe even invest in myself. I opened my laptop, clicked save on the property listings Diana had shown me. And for the first time in years, I wasn't thinking about survival. I was thinking about building something better. A week later, they returned. Not with spreadsheets, not with pleading voices. This time, it was a handwritten letter, left in the mailbox. Inside, my mother's handwriting filled both sides of the page. It was an apology, a real one. I've had time to reflect on my behavior, she wrote. Watching you build a life without us has forced me to confront truths I didn't want to see. I resented your independence. I thought you didn't need me, but now I see you did need me. Just not in the way I wanted. There was no request for money, no attempt to guilt trip me into responding, just acknowledgement. I didn't know what to do with it at first. It didn't erase the past, but it cracked open a door I thought had been welded shut. When I showed it to Jessica, she was cautious. They've been talking about writing to you for weeks, she said. Dad was against it, but something's changed, especially since his health scare last month. Health scare, I asked. High blood pressure, chest pains, nothing major. But it scared him. Maybe they were finally facing consequences, or maybe they were just adapting. But me, I wasn't the same anymore. I wasn't desperate for their approval. I didn't need to forgive them. I could choose if and when, and that power. It felt better than any apology ever could. I sold the apartment 2 weeks later. Diana worked fast. We listed it on a Thursday, had 3 offers by Monday, and closed within the month. The buyer, a young couple expecting their first baby, was enchanted by the twins' handprints in the hallway. I almost told them the full story of that home, but I didn't. Some chapters are best left behind. The new house was nothing grand. a 3-bedroom with creaky floors and mismatched kitchen cabinets. But it had a fenced backyard where Ethan and Emily could run freely, a front porch just big enough for a rocking chair and my coffee in the mornings, and sunlight. So much sunlight. It was the first time I had ever moved somewhere for myself. Not for James, not for my parents, just me and the kids. And in that humble little house, something incredible started to happen. We healed. Olivia continued working part-time, helping me juggle childcare while I ramped up my side business memorial websites. It had started as a one-off when I created a tribute page for James after his death. But word spread through the support group, and then referrals started coming in from grief counselors, hospice nurses, even funeral directors. Each site was personal, emotional, and designed with care. Photos, voice clips, love stories. It was painful work, but it felt right. Every design was a tribute to someone lost and a quiet act of solidarity with someone left behind. I'd always thought grief was something you get over, but it's not. It's something you carry, like a scar that aches when the weather changes but reminds you that you lived through something impossible. Jessica visited almost every weekend. At first she brought groceries or hand-me-down toys from her coworkers, but eventually she just started showing up, to play, to sit, to be part of things. One Saturday, as we watched the twins chase bubbles in the backyard, she turned to me and said, "I think I finally understand what it must have felt like, growing up." I didn't respond right away, but I felt the shift in her voice, the recognition. She wasn't excusing our parents anymore. She wasn't defending them. She was beginning to see. "They made me think you were selfish," she added, "but you were just surviving." I nodded. So were you, in your own way. It wasn't absolution, but it was real. Honest. That was more than I ever got growing up. 3 months post-surgery, my parents lost the house. Jessica broke the news gently. They had failed to catch up on their mortgage, and the bank had followed through. The house was auctioned, and within weeks they'd moved into a modest condo, half the size, none of the view. My father had to sell the boat at a steep loss. My mother let go of the timeshare for pennies on the dollar, and the retirement lifestyle they'd so proudly curated, gone. "They're telling everyone you abandoned them," Jessica said over dinner one night, "that you broke some promise to support them forever." I smirked. Let them talk. Because I didn't need to defend myself anymore. The truth had a way of catching up, and it did. My father's sister, my no-nonsense aunt who had always taken his side, called me out of the blue. Her voice was softer than I remembered. "I heard what really happened, Natasha," she said. "I'm so sorry." Then came messages from cousins, friends of friends, people who had believed the family narrative for years, suddenly reaching out with apologies, casseroles, and unsolicited offers to babysit. I didn't need validation, but it felt good to know that people were seeing things for what they were. The support group organized a neighborhood play date in my new backyard. Neighbors dropped off books and blankets. A woman named Angela, whose husband had died in Iraq, brought over a box of board games and a framed quote that read, "You don't have to set yourself on fire to keep others warm." I stared at it for a long time, because for most of my life I had. 6 months after surgery, another letter arrived, handwritten, again from my mother. But this time it was different. "I see now that we failed you," she wrote. "We expected you to carry our burdens and resented you when you couldn't. You never asked us for anything, and when you finally did, we turned our backs on you. That shame is mine to carry now. She didn't ask for money. She didn't ask for forgiveness. She asked for one thing, only acknowledgement. I sat with that letter for a long time. Read it again and again. Was it real? Could people like my parents change after a lifetime of selfishness? Jessica seemed to think so. "They've been in therapy," she said. "It's slow, but I think they're trying. And the truth is, I wasn't sure if I believed it, but I didn't need to. Because for once, my peace wasn't dependent on their sincerity. I was raising 2 children in a house I owned. I was running a business that brought comfort to the grieving. I was surrounded by people who chose me every day, not because I was useful, but because I was me. And that was enough. A month passed. No calls, no surprise visits, no more guilt-drenched emails trying to remind me of everything they'd sacrificed. Just silence. And for the first time in my life, it felt like peace. I spent my mornings working on client memorial sites while the twins napped or played beside me. Olivia still came 3 days a week, bringing her calm presence and unshakable steadiness. In the evenings, Jessica often stayed for dinner, helping with dishes, offering to run errands, sometimes just sitting quietly while we watched the twins chase bubbles in the backyard. One Friday afternoon, after she put down the coloring books and wiped peanut butter off Emily's cheeks, she said something unexpected. "You know, you don't have to forgive them. Not even a little." I looked up. She added, "They don't get access to your healing just because they're sorry. That's not how it works." And just like that, the pressure I hadn't realized I was still carrying eased. Jessica, the golden child for 3 decades, was now the one shielding me from our parents. Life is strange like that. I was in the kitchen a few days later packing snack bags for the twins' play date when the doorbell rang. I opened the door to find an envelope on the welcome mat. No knock, no caller, just a plain white envelope with my name on it. Inside was a typed letter from my father. It was the first correspondence I'd received from him that didn't include emotional manipulation or veiled demands. "We are sorry," he wrote, "not just for the surgery, but for years of selfishness. I know we expected too much, demanded too much. You carried more than you should have, and when you needed us most, we weren't there. You taught us what boundaries look like, and that they matter." He closed with this: "If you choose to forgive us someday, we'll be here. But if not, we understand. Either way, we are proud of the mother you've become." I didn't know what to feel. It was mature, measured. Nothing like the man who used to belittle my decisions or dismiss my boundaries like they were childish rebellions. Still, I didn't rush to respond, because here's the thing: people rarely admit you can accept an apology and still keep your distance. You can recognize someone's growth without letting them back into the sacred parts of your life. A few days later, Valerie, the nurse who had sat beside me during those terrifying hours in the hospital, stopped by. She brought her kids, and juice boxes, and 2 lawn chairs. We sat outside while our children ran through the sprinklers and screamed with joy. "You look different," she said, sipping lemonade. "Lighter." I smiled. I feel it. Valerie had been the first person to truly see my panic, back when I was a trembling widow alone in a hospital bed, begging her mother to care about her. She had reached out not just with medical help, but human help. "You saved me," I said softly. She shook her head. "No. You saved yourself. I just helped you remember how." The community we were building started to solidify. The other widowed parents from the support group began rotating playdates. Diana introduced me to a contractor who offered to fix my backyard fence for half the normal cost after hearing about my story. Jessica continued to show up, no longer performing goodness for our parents' approval, but simply being present for me. She never asked when or if I'd reconnect with them. She just helped with diapers, washed dishes without being asked, and once sat next to me during a thunderstorm while I cried quietly for James, the one person who had always believed in me without question. Then came the final blow, a voicemail from Jessica. "You should know. They applied for a reverse mortgage on the condo." I froze mid-step. It was denied, she continued. "Their credit is wrecked. They tried to borrow against what little equity they had left. It's not looking good." I sighed. "Are they okay?" I asked, already hating myself for still caring. "They're not homeless," she replied, "but they're hurting. A lot." I sat in silence. I wasn't vengeful. I didn't wish them harm. But this was what happened when you live your life on a fantasy of permanent rescue. when you gamble with your children's loyalty and treat love like a bank account. A week later, I received a card, not a letter, a card. The front read, "Thank you for setting boundaries." Inside, my mother had written, "We didn't understand them at first, but now we're learning to." There was no manipulation, no promises, no bargaining chips, just a quiet admission. I placed the card on the kitchen shelf, not as a token of forgiveness, but as a reminder of who I was now. A woman who had drawn a line in the sand and meant it. A mother who had chosen peace for her children. A daughter who no longer begged to be seen. By month 9, the old life felt like a dream I barely remembered. The hospital, the betrayal, the way my parents' voices used to twist my stomach into knots with guilt and obligation, all of it blurred. Because now, I had clarity. The new house had been painted inside and out, soft sage walls in the twins' room, a calming gray in mine. Olivia helped me hang string lights in the backyard. Diana brought over starter herbs from my garden. Jessica showed up with patio chairs and a grill she found on clearance. We had family dinners, not the forced kind with linen napkins and eggshell tension, but real ones with crumbs on the floor, juice box wars, and laughter that filled the space between breaths. I was exhausted, still grieving James, still adjusting, but I was living. My business had grown faster than I'd anticipated. The memorial websites I'd started designing after James's death were now in quiet demand. Grief counselors from nearby clinics were referring clients. Funeral homes had begun reaching out. I'd built custom sites for veterans, teachers, single moms, even a young girl who died of leukemia. Each one required emotional excavation, but each one gave something back, too. Every page I created felt like building a monument both for them and for James. Then one night, as I was uploading a video tribute to a site I'd just completed, I received an email with the subject line, "Legacy and Grief Interview Request." A journalist from a grief and resilience podcast had heard about my site through one of the therapists I worked with. They wanted to interview me not just about the business, but about surviving loss as a mother, as a daughter. I almost deleted the email. Then I thought about James, about Valerie and Olivia, about Diana and Jessica, and every single step I'd taken away from survival and toward stability. I said yes. The recording happened 2 weeks later, over Zoom. I was nervous, but the host was kind, gentle. She asked about my husband, about building something in the aftermath of devastation, about how I'd managed to raise 2 toddlers while grieving and recovering. Then she asked the question I'd been expecting and dreading. "You've hinted that you experienced a break in your extended family." What happened? I hesitated. Then I told the truth. I didn't name names. I didn't go into unnecessary detail. I simply said this: I asked my parents for help during a medical emergency, and they chose concert tickets instead. I had to choose whether to keep funding their lifestyle or protect my children. I chose my children. I'd choose them again every time. The interviewer paused. Then she said, "That's not betrayal. That's motherhood." And just like that, years of internalized shame melted. 2 days after the episode aired, my inbox exploded. Messages from other parents, other daughters, other sons, people who had also walked away from toxic families and carried the guilt like a wound. One email said I thought I was a monster for cutting off my mother, but after hearing your story, I see now. I was protecting myself. Another thank you for showing that boundaries can also be love, just not the kind our parents taught us. I cried reading them because I finally realized I wasn't the villain in my family's story. I was the hero, quiet, steady, fierce when I had to be. Then came the twist. Jessica arrived on a rainy Sunday afternoon looking hesitant. "They're broke," she said without preamble. Like, truly. They had to give up the condo. I blinked. Where are they living? A small rental. Outside town. Dad's working part-time at the hardware store. Mom's cleaning houses. That last one stopped me. My mother, Diana Wilson, queen of dinner parties and passive-aggressive judgment, now cleaning bathrooms to survive. I didn't feel glee. I felt a strange, quiet grief. Not for them. For the illusion I had once clung to that one day they'd love me the way I needed. Jessica shifted in her chair. "They asked about you." I raised an eyebrow. "They didn't ask for money," she added quickly. "They said they heard your podcast. Said," you sounded strong, "that they didn't recognize you in a good way." "Because I'm not the same," I said. "They just never expected me to stay different." Jessica nodded. "Mom asked if she could write you again. I didn't say yes, but I didn't say no either, because for once I had space, not for them to move back in, but to maybe knock at the edge of the life I'd built if they came with humility." That night, I tucked the twins in and walked into the backyard. The wind had picked up. Leaves danced in spirals across the porch. I pulled my cardigan tight and sat down on the step. This house, these kids, this life. It wasn't just survival anymore. It was mine, built with pain, fortified by boundaries, filled with joy. And I didn't owe it to anyone.